World Development Report 2014, Risk and Opportunity. Managing Risk for Development, the Opportunity Side of Risk, with Mushfiq Mubarak, Associate Professor of Economics, Yale School of Management.
So risk is often an important and necessary part of taking advantage of economic opportunities. So today I'll talk to you with a few examples about whether people around the developing world are not adopting products, technologies, behaviors that we think are profitable because of a fear of risk. So I'll give you a few examples of this. So first we'll start with the story of migration. So it turns out in developing countries and agrarian areas, there's often lean seasons. And this comes from the fact that people get all of their income during the harvest. And the pre-harvest season, when people are just waiting for the crop to grow, is a lean season when labor demand is low because there's not much work to do in agrarian areas, and wages also fall during that period. And unfortunately, it also happens to be the time when rice price spikes up, and this means that the combination of high prices and the low wages leads to a lot of seasonal hunger, and often takes the form of a seasonal famine in some countries, like in Bangladesh. Okay? Now, one way to cope with this seasonal hunger might be to migrate away to areas just for that particular season, to areas where there are better economic opportunities. So people living in agrarian areas could move to cities, they could work in construction, or they could pull rickshaws and earn some money that allows them to cope with this lean season. So we studied this by running a randomized control trial where we offered people incentives to migrate during this period in northern Bangladesh. And in some cases, we offered just information. In other cases, in some other villages, we offered people the equivalent of buying a bus ticket plus a couple of days of food, so about $8.50 transfers, conditional on the person migrating, or one person from the household migrating. Okay? And what you find, first, is that by providing information, you can't really affect people's decisions. Migration rates don't change. However, when you offer the $8.50 transfers, people are much more likely to seasonally migrate. And this is a period where it's a lean season at the origin, and they go for about 4 weeks, earn some money, bring some money back home, then they go for another 4 weeks and come back, and they come back during the harvest. And what you find is once people migrate, they earn a lot more at the destination, and their families consume a lot more at the origin. So if you're induced to migrate by the program, the family does a lot better. Okay? So then the question becomes, why are people not migrating to begin with? And what deepens the puzzle is that once you induce people to migrate, and a lot of people are successful, not everybody is successful, but you see in the data that maybe 80% of them are, you see that once you induce them to migrate, once you're successful, they actually go back again. And this time you don't need to induce them again. A year later, 3 years later in this sample, the people who were induced to migrate to begin with, they just continue to re-migrate at higher rates than in the control areas. Okay? So all of this poses a puzzle, that if it's so good, if you're eating a lot more, you're earning some income at the destination, and then you choose to migrate again in the future by yourself, why were you not doing it to begin with? Okay? And we think that the story has a lot to do with fear of failure or risk. And let me give an example to illustrate. So imagine I offer you a lottery ticket just like this. It costs about $10, kind of the bus ticket, and 80% of the time, that lottery pays off really big. 80% of the time, you'll get a return of 400, 500%. That $10 gets converted to extra $50 of income. Okay? But 20% of the time, you actually lose that $10. Okay? Would you buy that lottery ticket? Of course you would. It's a very good deal. I'm giving you a really high return with very high probability. However, now imagine that I offer you that lottery ticket at a time when your family is under the threat of famine. So you're very close to subsistence. You know how to survive. You're barely surviving year after year. But if you lose that $10, that might actually put you below subsistence, and something really bad might happen to your family. Okay? If the situation is like that, then it's much more difficult for you to take advantage of the upside, that $50 return with high probability, because the fear of the downside risk is what dominates your decision making. And so people in this case might not be migrating because the utility costs associated with failure might be really very, very high. So how do you induce people to migrate? So cash grants or credit with limited liability would do it, because what we're saying is we are covering the downside risk. So try it out. If it works, great. And if it doesn't work, we are covering the cost. You're no worse off. Okay? And so this type of a story, the fear of failure or extreme risk aversion, especially when people are very, very poor, might explain a lot of aversions to new technologies, products, and behavior that we think are good for people, that are welfare improving, that lead to higher income opportunities in the future. So there are other examples like agricultural technologies or even new products like improved cook stoves that might reduce indoor air pollution burden and acute respiratory infections. Okay? So in this case, how do you actually induce people to buy these things or invest in new products? You need to provide insurance of some sort. Insurance is often difficult to provide because if you try to insure a farmer's specific plot of land, they may then take on more risk, or they may not take care of the plot of land as well as they otherwise would because they're getting insurance payouts if it fails. And so these days, a different way to approach the problem, an innovation that's occurred in the insurance industry, is to use index insurance, which is that I'm not going to look at failure on any one particular plot of land. I'm just going to measure rainfall because I know that's something that farmers care about. And when I measure rainfall, I'll write an index contract on that basis. Right? If the rainfall is good, then you don't get a payout. If the rainfall is bad, then you'll get a payout. And so we've offered this type of index insurance across 3 states in India, in Uttar Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, and Tamil Nadu, in North and South India. And we wrote a very simple contract that insured people against delays in the onset of monsoon, which is something that farmers care about a lot. And we offered this insurance to both cultivators, so people who have land, as well as agricultural laborers, so people without land. And traditionally, insurance is not marketed to people without land because it's regulated like conventional indemnity insurance, and so you have to have an insurable interest like land in order to insure. But when you're writing rainfall insurance contracts, you don't actually need to, and which is what allowed us to market to laborers. Okay? So what you find in these studies is first that once you offer cultivators insurance, they take on more risk, which is exactly what you want. You want farmers to be switching away from safe, low-return technologies to a little bit riskier but high-return technologies, and they're able to do so because they have access to insurance and they know they'll get payouts if there's a drought. And so the downside risk is not as problematic for them once they have insurance. Okay? So they take on more risk, but now think about what that does to agricultural laborers. If my employer, the cultivator, is taking on more risk, that's making the environment a lot more risky for me. Right? So in good rainfall years, I'm going to earn a lot more. There's a lot more harvest work to be done. In bad rainfall years, during droughts, I'm going to do much more poorly than otherwise. So this means that offering rainfall insurance only to cultivators but not offering to agricultural laborers might actually make the agricultural laborers worse off than if insurance did not exist at all. Okay? And we see exactly this in this data. Once you offer cultivators insurance, they take on more risk, and wages become much more volatile across rainfall states. It's much higher during good rainfall and it's much lower than otherwise during droughts. Okay? And so laborers then have a really strong demand for insurance. And we also see that allowing laborers to also insure themselves helps them manage the downside risk associated with the cultivators taking on a little bit too much risk. So we just went through a few examples where the fear of failure or inability to take on risk prevents people from investing in products, behaviors, technologies that are likely to be welfare improving for them, that allow them to pursue economic opportunities. And we also learned that insurance products can help people mitigate those risks and invest in technologies that's going to make them better off in the future. And this insurance can take on many forms. So first, rainfall insurance or weather insurance for farmers is one very big example of this. But offering people credit with limited liability so that they only need to pay back when things work out for them is another form of insurance that can be pursued. Finally, for new products, you could also think about warranty schemes. That's a form of insurance. Or risk-free trial periods where people try out technologies and then decide, once they learn that it works for them, then they decide whether to pay for it and keep the technology for themselves. So these are all the different forms of insurance that can help people mitigate these risks and pursue economic opportunities.